The energy trends of September 2025 carry empire-defining alignments. Equinoxes and eclipses, like the ones we're experiencing in September, have historically been used by kings, queens, politicians, and military leaders for thousands of years as their celestial markers for major moves, like their warfare campaigns, royal appointments, and other major announcements. Typically in the world, when we see these globally shifting events, it's often happening around an eclipse or an equinox. This means that the moves made in September are the setup for empires to either rise or fall. Just look at things like the burning of a financial institution by the people of Nepal, or look at the first AI-generated politicians being appointed to government status by the government of Albania. So, how are you going to use the energy trends of September to either build or protect your empire? Hi friends, and welcome to September 2025. This is the Futurecast, and I'm your host and cosmic coach, Moriel Loren. This video will explore the geocosmic energy trends for the month ahead and how it relates to your life, business, relationships, as well as the world stage. I'm ready if you are, so let's dive in. The month begins with the collapse of the illusion of safety on September 1st as Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces for the next 5 months. Banks, financial institutions, governments, leaders, executives, all starting to show signs of the cracks that are hiding underneath, and the fact that they're built on illusion and fantasy and don't hold up to measure when tested. Saturn retrograding through Pisces is going to dissolve something that's an illusion because it's just fanciful, or perhaps in some cases because it's an outright deception. Look at the world stage, things like the collapse of the Nepalese government. The people are burning down government and financial institution buildings because the taxpayers are being taxed to the brink. Meanwhile, the government is taking all of their money and spending it on things that don't help the people. We also can look at things like Afghanistan. It's at the point where women are literally not legally allowed to speak in public. And there's been global outrage thinking how insane that 50% of the population isn't allowed to use their voice in a public space. And there have been riots about that. We're also seeing things in the US political system around changes to the Federal Reserve and some of the financial boards being questioned and changed around. So when things are either just not cut up to the mustard or perhaps intentionally being played a game, that begins to collapse from September over the next 5 months. But even in our own lives, looking at our businesses or our belief systems and some of our relationships, we're going to have to evaluate what's real, what's lasting, and what's actually the most resourceful and helpful. So in your business and in your life this month, it's time to hunker down, to get serious about the nitty-gritty, the unglamorous foundations of what it takes to succeed or to at least withstand in the long term. And you have to get very finite about the agreements you're making with yourself and business partners around the distribution of resources and responsibilities, because otherwise the excitement is going to wear off, or the hope is going to wear off, and you're going to discover that there's not much left in the bag. The good news is that this month can be used in your business and in your life to solidify those foundations, particularly structural, financial, or we could say governing or responsibility oriented within your organization, to make sure that your empire is being built on solid foundations and that your kingdom is protected. So just audit your foundation. Ask yourself, where in my life am I building on something that isn't stable? And rip it out and replace it with the thing or person or belief that you know will serve you resourcefully in the long run. The energy of the month continues as the messenger planet Mercury shifts into the constellation of detail-oriented Virgo from September 2nd to 18th. This is to help clarify and purify your thoughts, contracts, and agreements. So you may need to get more clear on the nitty-gritty of what you're really looking for. And in order to do that, you may have to peel back some of your belief systems or thought patterns that were perhaps poisonous or more relevant to a different time in your life or business in order to speak more clearly about what you really need now. And don't forget what you're also willing to bring to the table for the other party. Because we've got to come to either a verbal understanding or agreement this month or a contractual understanding. Basically, the energy is, do we have a deal or not? But in order to make a good deal, you've got to get super clear on your position. Now, furthermore, in the spiritual sense, Virgo is the symbol of the alchemist, meaning it's the thing that turns lead into gold or the thing that turns poison into medicine. So before you open your mouth, promise something, or put something on paper, it's time to do some deep consideration within about what's really going on in here and in here so that you can express it with authenticity and clarity and integrity in spoken word or on paper. The month continues with a glitch in the matrix that could reveal your thoughts and opinions may not actually be your own. On September 5th, the planet of innovation, Uranus, goes retrograde in the communication sign of Gemini for the next 6 months. Uranus in Gemini rules things like trade, AI, and the very fabric of thought and communication in our world itself. So over the next 6 months, there may be some major reveals about how our digital information is being shared. There could be some major censorship on our ability to express and communicate our ideas and free speech, and some major tech bombs about both the strengths as well as potential threats of AI as it continues to infiltrate our everyday society. Already this month, look at things like the fact that the country of Albania has elected its first AI government parliament member. Yes, they have an AI-generated human, a female dressed in the traditional Albanian clothes, who is going to be making decisions about their laws because they believe that AI is going to be more neutral and unbiased than an individual. So this is the first world experiment in Albania of trying to use AI to run our country. What do you think about that? And do you really think that Albania is going to be the first and last country to start replacing human leadership with AI? We're seeing other questions about the efficacy of AI use in news, like the fact that the technology company Palantir has just bought the Aura ring. Yes, the little rings people wear on their fingers that gives all of your biometrics. Well, they're selling your personal biological information to the Department of Defense. There's been a lot of questions around the efficacy of privacy for citizens, safety, and curiosity as to why the government should have access to such kind of information and what they intend to do with it. So there's 2 ways you could choose to play with this energy in your life and business, depending on which thought experiment you want to follow. The first is you could choose to use this Uranus and Gemini energy to completely automate and technologize your business. I mean, why not use the benefits of modern technology, particularly with narrow AI, not really getting into general advanced intelligence or even the idea of super intelligence, but at least narrow AI to streamline the efficiency of processes in your business or to outsource some of the smaller tasks that you don't want to have done by your team members. Now, another way you could choose to play with this Uranus and Gemini energy is to do a tech detox in your life or business. I mean, what would happen if you spent a day or maybe even a week where you weren't scrolling through social media, or you were taking a technology break at the end of the day from your phone, giving your thoughts back to yourself? I mean, what would you discover you actually think and your real opinions and intuitions are if they weren't being controlled by an algorithm, constant dopamine hits, and continuous stimulation? I would be very curious to see what your higher self actually tells you you need to do next in your life or business or relationships when you can have the privacy of your own pure thoughts and not be influenced by technology. The energy of the month reaches a peak point on September 7th with the lunar eclipse in the constellation of Pisces. A lunar eclipse is basically like a hyper-powered full moon, meaning it brings things to the surface to a point of culmination or completion. So you may find that situations in your life that have been boiling over the past couple of weeks finally reach that peak point, meaning it could be incredible progress, a great breakthrough, maybe a major step that you've needed. Or if something's already past that peak point and what it needs to do is reach its completion or its close, its finality, you may find that that circumstance is ready right around approximately the 7th of September. So I love this energy for any type of significant moves, deals, agreements, meetings, announcements that you want to plan this month. There's one other date towards the end of the month that I also love for major moves. We'll talk about that in a moment. Heads up, that's going to be about September 21st and 22nd. So this is the first time during the month where I would say if you had to gamble and make a bet on something, definitely shoot your shot around September 7th. However, on the world stage, the eclipses are going to bring boiling to the surface some of the more uncomfortable circumstances that have been going on. When we look at things like the famine on the Gaza Strip, or the fact that the Taliban have mandated that the Afghanistan women not only have to have completely cover their eyes, but it's also now illegal for them to even speak. We're also seeing, unfortunately, the rise in what they call witch camps in Kenya, where they're basically taking older women out of their communities and putting them in these pretty much close to concentration camps and accusing them of being witches, and they're just grandmothers, but they want to get these women out because they want to prevent them from sharing knowledge and information with the younger females and generations. So I'm concerned to see that some of the more disturbing world events do tend to reach a peak around things like eclipses and equinoxes. So that may come to a head. The good part about that, though, of course, is that we can all continue to be apprised and more aware of the progress of those situations and to keep sharing information and doing what we can to intercept on behalf of the greater good of all. The energy of the month starts to smooth out even more from September 18th to October 6th, when our messenger planet Mercury changes constellations again, this time shifting into the constellation of balance and justice, Libra. So this means that your attitude during the month starts to transform into mutual partnership. Hopefully earlier in the month when Mercury was in Virgo, you got more clear and honest and discerning about what you're actually looking for in interpersonal relationship or business partnership with others. And you were able to speak that or write that into a committed document and agreement between you and all parties. So now you're in the place in the month where you can focus on the interpersonal aspect of the relationship, the exchange of feelings, the exchange of goods and services, and trying your best to really show up for one another. Now, in terms of romance, after you got really clear on what each of you is seeking in your arrangement earlier in the month, now we can get into kind of the flirtatious, feel-good feelings of just being in love during the second half of the month. So that's a lot to look forward to, and it's a lot softer than some of the energy earlier of where our mind was. Now, what I will also say, particularly in business partnerships, is Mercury in Libra often is seeking justice. So if it turns out that a partnership of love or business hasn't really been clear and honest and the exchange isn't really mutual, then you will be seeking more justice in the second half of September and the first part of October. This is what I like to call the courtroom of the cosmos, where we air the dirty laundry and we have to face the things that are just not working out, and we got to call the cards. So that may be coming your way in those partnerships that aren't truly in your alignment. Speaking of the courtroom of the cosmos, on the world stage, we can definitely anticipate that after September 18th and moving into October, we may see some famous court cases flaring up. Yes, meaning where government officials, political leaders, executives are being called onto the proverbial witness stand to have to account for some of the things that they've been doing. We may also find that laws are actually in the initial process of being rewritten after more ethical standards are being assessed. So definitely watch out for those high-profile court cases and those changing of laws that will be coming our way. The court case that I'm personally most curious to see how it changes during September and October is, of course, the Epstein files. It's a perfect example of both questions about ethics as well as close interpersonal relationships and justice being called to the court. So we'll have to see what the evolution of the Epstein files is during that time. And also, I think there's going to be a lot of more court cases, particularly around AI and the sale of civilian information to government institutions. Our finances will take a shift from September 19th to October 13th, when the value-driven planet Venus changes constellations into practical Virgo for the next 3 weeks. This is a very different energy than the more generous and abundant spending that we've seen over the past few weeks, even in spite of the fact that the economy has felt overall a little bit tight and concerning. The shift of Venus into Virgo is about practical love, meaning we're really looking at our money and going, is this realistic? Is it essential? Do I need it right now? And if I spend the money, is it going to help me solve a practical problem? We're shifting away from Venus in Leo, which is a little more indulgent in luxuries, and we're shifting into more of a practical energy. So you may find, if you're in business, that selling to a customer more based on problem solving or practicality right now is going to get you more sales rather than appealing to, let's say, an aspirational identity of the customer or a luxurious and glamorous indulgence. That would have worked a couple of weeks ago when Venus was in Leo, but it's going to be less effective from September 19th to October 13th. So stick with the value add or the problem solve approach in sales. Now, also in terms of how we're thinking about money, we're going to see a lot of questioning around production and its effect on Mother Nature, meaning people are going to be raising their voice around products and companies that are harming planet Earth and putting humans or life forms in jeopardy simply to make a ton of money. This is going to become a big conversation in the news, so you're going to want to watch out for those attacks against companies that are clearly doing things at the detriment and high risk of the well-being of our population. Speaking of money as a form of love and service in action, you may find that money is an important part of your love life during the month of September and part of October as well. So this could look like your beloved clearly needing something in their life, and what they want you to do is put your money where your mouth is, or put your resources where your mouth is, to step in and help them in a very hands-on, practical way. So this is a little less traditionally romantic, like flowers and chocolates and all that kind of stuff, but it's really like looking at your partner saying, you know, hey babe, it looks like you need to get your car fixed. Let me take care of that for you. Or, hey babe, it looks like you really need help with something in your business. Let me step in and take care of that for you. Or something along those lines. So just remember that money is love in action, if that's how we want to see it. And this month, the way that this love wants to experience action is in the form of service. So basically look at your beloved and think, how can I help you? And then pull out your wallet, or at the very least, pull out your time and your effort. All right, now for the most important dates of September 2025. Frankly, the dates that I'm most curious about, but also the most nervous about, and that is September 21st through 22nd, for 3 reasons. We have a solar eclipse opposing Saturn at the 29th anaretic degree, we have the fall equinox, and we have the shift of Mars into Scorpio. We're going to break that down. So basically, within this 48-hour period, we have all the big boys and girls come out to play in the cosmos. The solar eclipse in the constellation of Virgo is happening at the 29th or anaretic, it's called the fated or final degree of a sign. And so that's always basically like the grand finale, right? When shit hits the fan or needs to come to the close. and it's opposing the planet Saturn. In traditional lore, Saturn is both the planet of karma as well as the planet of death. So when we've kind of got the Grim Reaper karma energy meeting the grand finale fated degree, we can expect that big stuff is going to happen. Now, how do we use this energy in our life or in our business? First of all, if we're needing to get out of something, this is the time to do it. Maybe it's that lease or that job or that relationship or that awkward situationship that you just need to end. Well, guess what? Plan it for around the 21st or 22nd. Now, in a positive sense, if there was something where we needed to almost seal our fate, right? We needed to put it in the ground and put it in place and know that we were going to put all of our destiny and energy into something and then watch how it unfolds, but perhaps over a period of time, that would be the date to put it in, right? If you were going to bury something in your business to infuse it with all the power to the future, I would pick this alignment. Now, other things that are happening around that energy on the world stage are probably going to have a lot to do with justice. Why? Because the fall equinox, which by the way every year happens in the constellation of Libra, is really going to highlight the idea of balancing the scales. Interesting fact is when you look at the symbols of the zodiac, you will notice that the symbol for Libra is a pair of judgment scales. Now, that's the only symbol in the zodiac that isn't animal or human, or we could say natural, like it's not a real thing, it's an object. Historically, the symbol of the scales goes back to the ancient tradition of Ma'at. Yes, it sounds like I'm saying the name Matt, but with an apostrophe in the middle of it. So Ma'at in the Egyptian story is the weighing of the heart against the feather on the scales of justice in the afterlife to decide whether your soul is light enough to go to the metaphorical heaven or heavy and has to go to the metaphorical underworld. So the tradition of the balancing of the scales or weighing of the heart against the feather, or basically assessing the heaviness or lightness of someone's karma in order to pass a cosmic threshold, goes back to the ancient Egyptians, is still carried in our symbolism of the zodiac today. And so when we reach the fall equinox, a lot of times that energy of balancing the scales, justice, right from wrong, standing in our integrity, or we could say also kind of having a final judgment before we're either allowed to pass or not pass into an important next threshold in our life, comes forth. Now, in the global stage, equinoxes, eclipses, and solstices have been used historically by political leaders, kings, queens, royalty, all kinds of people as the date with which they do their big moves. A lot of times they announce that there was a new king. They would say, hey, we're going to war. We're making a major political change. So we can pretty much guarantee that if we're all watching TV right around the 21st and 22nd, we're going to see some major political and global announcements. My concern is that I do think this particular alignment carries the energy of war this year, and that's because Mars, the planet of war and battle and action, is shifting into the constellation of Scorpio, which, when used at its highest, often means revelation of shadows and darkness, but for the betterment and leading us to the light. But when there's circumstances happening in the world that are already pretty shadowy or negative, sometimes it can mean that it's a little bit of a de-evolution. So when we're watching some of those war-torn landscapes like in Gaza or in Ukraine and other places in the world, I am a bit nervous that that eclipse/equinox energy could prove to be a difficult time period. So let's all put our prayers and our thoughts together to redirect it toward its equally valid higher energy potential, which could be about justice and balance in the scales of Ma'at. So again, in your life or business, if you had to plan something big, you didn't already do it earlier in the month, around September 7th, I would definitely bank on the 21st or 22nd. And the last significant alignment of the month arrives from September 22nd to November 5th, as the military planet Mars shifts into the stealthy constellation of Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio is the assassin's blade. So it takes that meaning, I cut like a knife to a whole new level. In our life and business, I find that Mars in Scorpio has penetrating insight and is on a ruthless search for the root of the truth. It wants to get to the bottom of things because truth is actually where we have our greatest power. So you may find over the next 3 months from late September to early November that in your business practices and in your life, you are out for the ruthless truth, meaning you're searching for it and you're also not afraid to say it. So even when it comes to business and sales and negotiations, say the thing that everybody else in the room is afraid to say because it sets you apart as a guardian of the truth. And people will trust you more because they know that you're no bull, right? So say the thing that other people are afraid to say. It cuts away forms of false power, like people who are trying to keep things covert in the business room, and it honors real power, which is always based in truth and reciprocity and love. The other thing we may see on the world stage, speaking of the Assassin's Blade, is literally quite that, meaning keep an eye out in the news from late September to early November for perhaps some covert warfare firms and definitely perhaps some infamous assassination attempts. All right, friends, now that you know the geocosmic energy trends of the month ahead, it's time for you to determine your destiny. If this video was helpful, please click like or the subscribe button and share this with other independent thinkers. And I challenge you to implement your knowledge of these energy trends into your decision making of your everyday life. And I also challenge you to assess the things you're not seeing about these invisible energies that are influencing you on a regular basis. Look, in today's world, you could use any online app or ChatGPT to tell you where the planets are and give you some kind of generic advice. But let me be brutally honest. They don't see the things that I see. I don't just read planetary charts. I decode invisible mechanics. I look at the influences that billionaires guard, that governments use, and that ancient kingdoms used to apply when making all of their ruling decisions. I fuse astrology and leadership coaching into a unified single system that no one else has mastered. And the result? CEOs, trial attorneys, Secret Service agents, and intelligence officers have been left speechless at my level of accuracy to anticipate events, understand people and situations, and predict when things are going to happen next, down to the very date. So if you're serious about building your legacy and you want more than just generic advice, then come to the strategist that the most powerful people seek when the stakes are high in their life, relationships, and business. I hope to see you in my office or online for a private session. I'll leave the link below. And until next time, when our stars align.